Welcome to Rat's Tool Chest. Today we're going to look at the refurbishing job that I did on a Caterpillar 248 skid steer. So this is the Caterpillar 248 that came from an auction. Already done a little bit of work to it. Cleaned up the front, took the steps off. Both the hooks were bent. Put a little heat on those and bit them back fairly straight, and then repainted the front. When we got it, none of the hydraulics worked. The hydrostatic drive, the boom arm auxiliary, none of it worked. Ended up taking almost the entire inside apart. To try and diagnose the problem. First thing you want to do if you're working on one of these is make sure that the gas springs are in good shape, because trying to lift that cab up and down without that gas spring assisting gets to be a real pain. So as you can see right now, we have the interlock manifold out of it, and then the pilot manifold is sitting down here on the floor plate. Got through, put a fresh coat of paint on all the inside of this. Ended up having to take the hydrostatic pump out, and then took the auxiliary pump out and replaced the flex plate that is in there. Ended up having to do a lot of cleanup on it. Right now you can see all the way down to the floor down there. Yeah, it's got some dirt and some other debris down in there, but that literally had about 4 to 6 inches worth of hydraulic fluid mixed with and you see some of the tape where we've been painting the side of it. Hydraulic fluid mixed with dirt, debris, and for the most part rotting vegetation that accumulated over years and years and years. This stuff just absolutely stunk and made it impossible to get to anything down in the bottom. So completely cleaned all that out. Did most of that by hand with a couple of concrete trowels, and then power washed it out. First thing that we need to do is look at what we did as far as diagnostics on this. We had no hydraulics on it. The engine ran, engine would start with no problem, but none of the hydraulic functions were working, except for the rear fan, which is driven off of the other side of the engine. But your 3 main pumps that drive your wheels and all of your auxiliary functions didn't have any response. First thing I did was hook a gauge port up to the diagnostic port on the X port of the pressure compensator. That's the pressure compensator and load sensing spools on the bottom side of this axial piston pump. This is a high flow unit, so it's going to have the bigger axial piston pump in it instead of the smaller gear pump unit. So if you have the gear pump unit, you may not have access to that port. But either way, what I determined was that this auxiliary pump was not moving any fluid whatsoever. So the next thing, once I determined that the auxiliary pump was not working at all, So once I determined that the auxiliary pump was not moving any fluid. I didn't think it was receiving power from the crankshaft of the engine, so started the process of removing all three of the pumps in here. Marked all the hoses and did it very methodically. These were absolutely in nasty condition when I removed them. The bottom of the skid steer had 4 to 6 inches of built up dirt mixed with hydraulic fluid, which is a whole nother video on why these things catch on fire. Is I think they not very regularly cleaned out, and that accumulates in the 2 holes in the bottom are simply not big enough to really flush it out well. You really need to get in here and pressure wash all the gunk out of it, especially if you have hydraulic leaks. And you should fix all the hydraulic leaks. And if you have a big mess down there, it makes it really hard to locate where they are. The cleaner it is, the easier it is to see where things are leaking from. I'll do another video just on all the hydraulic seals that are used in these, and they're very, very standard seals. This uses O-ring face seal and JIC fittings primarily, and some O-ring boss fittings. Matter of fact, all the O-ring boss fittings are in the pump faces, machined into the pump faces themselves. But after removing all 3 of the pumps, the issue became very evident. This is the coupling that goes between the shaft on the drive pumps, on your hydrostatic pumps that drive your wheels, and it mates to a flex plate that mounts to your flywheel as so. You can see where it mounts to your flywheel holes. And this coupling goes inside and mates to your shaft, and this allows movement both in the axial and radially for your pump shaft for minor misalignment issues. This pump is only held on with 2 bolts. I don't know if we can see them. They're pretty far back there. But 1 bolt on this ear and 1 on the other side. They're fairly large bolts, I think, maybe M16s. Anyway, once I had this out, it became really evident. The shaft was just spinning in here. These splines, as you can see here, are supposed to go all the way through. And whoever had this just ran it until all the splines were basically eaten out. Believe it or not, this is made out of soft enough material, which is a good design, that all the splines on the shaft itself were all in good shape and intact. So just went to Caterpillar and bought a new flex plate and new coupling, mounted that out, torqued this bolt to spec, which is in the manual. I'll write that down in the description when I post this video. Once we did that, we did just basically a general cleanup of everything in here. Took the lockout manifold, which is right here, out completely. Still need to replace a nut here on the high flow solenoid circuit. It's the high flow enable there. Took all the valves out and took the hydraulic tank out. And sorry, the sun's really playing with me here. Took the hydraulic tank out, cleaned it out, flushed it out. When I disconnected these lines right here, I found water in the hydraulic circuit. So completely flushed the hydraulic circuit. Got all the fluid that had water mixed in it out. And I think what had happened was they had lost the cap to the hydraulic tank. And when they lost the cap to the hydraulic tank, they stuffed rags and plastic bags in there, because I found rags and plastic bags in the hydraulic tank, which is about the worst place ever to have those, because those plastic bags and those red rags, as you can see, end up feeding right into your all of your pumps and your hydraulic circuits, and if those get in there and clog up orifices or get into the pistons inside the pumps, you're going to have a very, very bad day. That's what I was actually fearing when this thing wasn't operating hydraulically, that they had gotten something inside of the hydraulic system and actually damaged the pumps and seized up the shaft in it. Luckily, that was not the case. Here's a picture of the skid steer with the 3 pumps removed. As you can notice, I've already cleaned out all the gunk in the bottom. You literally couldn't see the bottom of this. It had, like I said, 4 to 6 inches of material built up on top of it. Cleaned all that out of there. In the background, you can see the flywheel where the that flex plate mounts inside of there that the pump's attached to. Once the tandem pump and the auxiliary pump were removed from the machine, I hung them up in order to prep them for paint. I plugged all the ports prior to cleaning to make sure that the contamination on the outside of the pump stayed on the outside. Also kept the paint overspray out of the internals when I painted them. The pump was a pretty big mess, but it ended up looking pretty good. With the pumps out of the way, I decided to remove the interlock manifold and replace all the seals in the manifold. It was also a great opportunity to clean up the manifold, as it was pretty grimy, just like everything else in the bottom of the skid steer. I used colored cable ties to mark the locations of each fitting and hose. While you can skip this and refer to the hydraulic schematic in the maintenance manual if you have one, it sure saves a lot of time to get some colored cable ties or colored electrical tape and mark the connections. I prefer cable ties when dealing with oils and such, as the electrical tape doesn't seem to hold up well, and if it falls off, it kind of makes the whole effort moot. I'd also removed the pilot valve on the left side. This gave me good access to the left portion of the hull, and I painted it this time. After painting under the left pilot manifold and the interlock manifold, I degreased the lower hole under the operator floorboard, and removed the right pilot valve joystick, and painted the entire front portion of the hull. This is a good opportunity to talk about the paint I used. I had a gallon of Caterpillar OEM paint, but this paint was fairly costly, so I got some samples of some other paints and then color matched them to the machine. Some of these paints claim to be Caterpillar yellow, New Cat yellow, Old Cat yellow. For this machine, manufactured in 2002, I found Van Sickle's New Cat Yellow was a pretty good match, and at a quarter to a third of the price of the OEM Caterpillar paint, this will do just fine for the interior. I'll save the OEM paint for the outside.
Underneath. I'll take first off, get the up. Can you do that? We need to.
Let's open this back door. You can kind of see what you're dealing with here. That's all hydraulic fluid mixed with organic matter and dirt and everything else. You can see the sheen on it of the oil that's mixed in there with it. So we're going to get all that out, get all that cleaned up, and then we'll see what else we can do with this. One of the things we did notice when we did look at this before the auction was notice that the fan was turning, and as you can see right here, this has a hydraulically driven fan, and that told us that the charge system was working, because there's your hydraulic fan motor. Then right down here, oops, you can see it, that is your charge pump. Right here. So we'll be getting this area cleaned up once again, and we'll look at it again after that. Okay, I decided I wanted to take this back bumper off, go ahead and paint it. I'd already beaten that out, put a torch on it, and because this was all pulled out, but you can see there's a hairline crack in it. I'm going to go ahead and weld that back up, and I'd much rather do that on a bench than out here on the machine. So I noticed there's 2 bolts that hold this back bumper weight, whatever you want to call it, on the machine on the back side. Then there's supposed to be 3 bolts on the bottom. However, as you can see, only the center one is there. However, that center one goes through that engine mount right there on the back of the engine block, holding up all the, it's kind of tied in with all the accessory belt drive and all of that here on the back of the engine. So I've built a little bit of cribbing here, and I'm going to tighten this down just to lift that engine up to support that engine while I pull that back bumper off, because it's going to end up with a it looks like 1/4 inch steel, so that'll be about a 1/4 inch gap there. Okay, I've got the pneumatic out. We'll give it a shot. I used the nut with a nylock lock ring on it. Oh, that's pretty good, but now the problem is it's pushing up too far for my wrench to engage it on the top. I'll go find something to take care of that. I went ahead and got a ratchet with a shallow socket on it to get that engine mount bolt out. You can see it now. I've got the engine mount out, and it was an 18 millimeter on both sides, and then the 2 end bolts here are 24 millimeter. Let's see what you have here. And typical for this machine has been full of crud and stuff down underneath there. We'll get underneath there and clean all that out. And then here is that bumper piece. After removing the rear bumper from the skid steer, I TIG welded across where the chain receptacle was damaged, bent, and cracked, and it took about 3 or 4 layers of TIG weld in there, and then I ground it smooth, flush with the original material, and painted it, and then put it back onto the skid steer. Having this removed also helped with getting all of the oil and debris out of the back of that, or the back compartment of the skid steer, the engine bay, and enabled me to degrease that and repaint it as well. The rear engine mount was also missing one of its bushings. I don't know if you can really tell in the picture here, but the engine was sitting lower in the previous shots, and in this shot it's sitting where it's supposed to be. Sourced the correct engine mount from Caterpillar, and it brought the rear of that engine up at least a ½ inch, if not 3/4 of an inch. I'll be editing and releasing more content on the skid steer restoration, the Caterpillar 248, along with some upcoming projects on an ASV RC100 compact track loader and a New Holland Workmaster 60. If you like the content, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons. It doesn't cost you a thing and helps the channel out a lot. Also, it makes it easy to find new content when it's released. Thanks again for watching, and hit that like and subscribe button. It helps the channel out a lot.